Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to another amazing Saturday session. What a difference. Oh, it's Sunday. Okay. That's very indicative of what life has been like, I think, in the last month, or I don't even know, maybe going back all the way to October 7th. I was going to say what a difference that 3 weeks makes. The last time we gathered in this space, I had a wonderful stand-in that gave us a lovely lecture on sociology here and had a nice little bit of humor. So appreciate Rami. Thank you so much. But I was gone because a couple of days before the Halakha, Mito, our youngest son, who's 19, announced to me that he wanted to go to Chicago to visit one of his friends, and had the great idea that, oh, you know what, I'm just going to drive by myself 6 hours and I'm going to go up and see my friends. Don't know where I'm staying, don't know anything about what we're doing. I'm just going to go. And so, as a parent, you go, okay, well, you really have not been a driver for very long. So deciding to drive by yourself for 6 hours and just assuming everything is going to be fine is probably not a great idea. But he's 19, he's just finished his freshman year in college, and I can't very well say, no, you can't go, because that would be like, oh, I'm going. So I basically had two choices. I could either say, fine, pray to God that you'll be okay, or I could decide to go with him. And I decided to go with him. And thankfully I did, because then he had actually a place to stay and he had food to eat and he was okay. So, that was good. And we were driving back, when this halakha was taking place. But fast forward 3 weeks, and the conversation this week has been, Mom, I want to go to the encampment. Do you think I could go, because there's a high likelihood that I'm going to get arrested? And I can't tell you, obviously, the types of emotions that you go through, and even the guilt, because, this is like, making it real. And then you, of course, cannot help but think about what people have been suffering in Palestine and Gaza, and feeling, a bit ashamed that you're even worried about your own child, because, yeah, he might get arrested. Yeah, he might get brutalized, and he might get traumatized. Like, for example, our dear friend Cheyenne, who did get arrested because he wanted to show up and make sure the kids were okay. He ended up getting arrested and brutalized, and, just there are no words for that. Another dear friend who you all know too, female, was arrested. She's been here in our space, Dalal. She was, she was brutalized, targeted, strip searched for protesting on the lawn against a genocide. These are the things that we here in America are not used to. And not that anyone is used to it by definition of where you live. But the fact that now this affects all of us, is an awakening. And it's a tremendous awakening. And I guess in some ways it's a blessing, because you realize this is serious. This is not a game. It continues, the genocide. And, it's such a moment in time where everything has changed. Even time itself has changed, emotions. And there's just so much to say. But I want to point our attention to the incredible khutbah on Friday, which demonstrates so much. You're glued to social media, you're hearing what people are saying, you're ingesting the news, and you're thinking, okay, what else can possibly be said, and how more can we listen? What more can we listen to try and articulate how offended and just, how there's just nothing to say about how horrible things are. And you see that this incredible khutbah that Sheikh gave just exploded so much and demonstrated the importance of knowledge and scholarship and learning, especially in this time. So this khutbah was called Protest or Perish, Lessons from the Ant Colony. And I think one of the most important things that he stated clearly, that I have not heard anywhere else, is that this is an American genocide. This is not a point where we are complicit, or that we are just having our tax dollars go there. This is our genocide. Everything that happens over there in Gaza is not just about our money, it's our weapons, it's our people, it's our total commitment. And so to hear someone just call it out, this is an American genocide, was very important and very powerful. Secondly, the analogy to the ant colony was so important. You really have to listen to this khutbah if you haven't listened to it. We learned about the beauty of ants when we did our tafsir of the Quran. But the most important lessons from this is that if you understand how an ant colony works, this is obviously a beautiful creation of Allah, and there's so much learning in understanding the Quran of creation. The ant colony is extremely, it works with incredible precision. You have a queen at the head. You have individual ants. They all know what they're supposed to be doing. They all perform their job. And, they create structure and organization. You see how ant colonies work. But the key to the survival of the ant colony are the few ants that go out, the pioneers, the innovators, the ones that are individuals that go out and search for food. And they are doing this for the sake of the collective, because if they don't find new sources of nutrition and food, then once the colony eats all of its food, it will die because there's nothing else to live on. So, it's a really important role that these individual pioneers go out and search for food, possibly never coming back again. But once they find food, they leave a trail back for the other ants to follow. And then there's, a dynamic where now the innovators, the pioneers, the discoverers that have found the food, there's a team that goes and, allows that discovery to come back to the colony, and then the colony can benefit from that. So Sheikh gave a very powerful analogy in the beginning, in the first khutbah, about how the student protesters are like those innovators, the individuals who are brave, who are out there, saying, look, we have to think differently. We have to, think about the survival of us as a democracy, what needs to be done. It's wrong that we are committing this genocide. We have to stand up for something much better. And this is a sign of a vibrant, healthful society. If you have people who can protest and who can state their dissent and not get quashed. But the fact that students around the country are getting quashed by, university administrators, by the police, by the whole system, is a sign that, this is where we are. You are basically killing the health of your own society by quashing that dissent. Now, in the second khutbah, I thought it was even more powerful, because when you turn that whole analogy to the Muslim Ummah, it's really important to, we are at the bottom of the barrel, as we know, at rock bottom in so many ways. If we take that analogy of the ant colony to how we are as Muslims, we have what we consider the status quo, the structure, the individuals who are holding up kind of like how things have always been. And then you've got the individuals who are the innovators and the people who are going out for the sake of the ummah. From where I'm sitting, when I listen to that khutbah, I think about what we've done here and how we have spent 3 years on a tafsir, really understanding the Quran, what it says to us about social justice, about innovativeness, about thinking. Everything that we do here, we try to go outside of the status quo. We challenge the status quo. We think out of the box, whether it's calling out people to social justice, to action, whether it's having women give the adhan, or, having, me speak here without a hijab, or, publishing music, or, talking about sexual abuse in our communities, or, calling this an American genocide. Every single week, what we produce, what Sheikh produces, pushes the boundary and pushes, us as an ummah to think, outside of the norms. And it wasn't lost on me either that this weekend in Columbus, we had an event on campus where Yasser Qadi was invited to speak to the masses. Meanwhile, for the Friday khutbah, at the same time that Sheikh was giving this particular khutbah about the ant colony, I listened to that khutbah, and it was very much what I would consider the status quo. There wasn't anything that was said during that khutbah that anyone hasn't already heard on social media. And it was important, of course, for us to gather and for, us to represent, on the campus and have a khutbah on the campus. So kudos to the organizers for bringing, that group of people together, and an important person in our community to speak to them. But where we are now, with the genocide going on, where Muslims are decimated all around the world, where we have no voice, where 2 billion of us cannot stop a genocide. It's obviously time where we have nothing to lose, and we really have to take these lessons from the ant colony, from the Quran, from God, that we have to invest in and embrace our innovators and our discoverers, the people who are, straying and exploring outside the status quo to bring life to our ummah. I have to say also, because when I look at how many students have been brutalized, and I think the number now around the country is like 2,000 students have been arrested in these protests, or at least that was the number that I saw a few days ago. For us as Muslims, these are our kids. These are our students that are on the front line getting arrested. And what became very clear in what we've been doing here too, which has been, being active at UCLA behind the scenes. Sheikh, serves on several different committees that have been really grappling with this issue of calling the police on campus. We cannot help but notice that a lot of this is a failure of Muslim capital. We know that the chancellor at UCLA has been getting a lot of calls from Zionist donors. This is not unique. There are Zionist donors at every single one of these campuses where our kids are getting arrested. And for 30 years, Sheikh has been calling on Muslim capital, the wealthy, to invest in academic institutions. At UCLA, they were ready to close the oldest Islamic studies program in the country, and Sheikh actually jumped in and saved that. This was about 10 years ago, because Muslims would not invest in academic institutions or in intellectual projects. And this is where that comes home to roost, because when you've got Zionist donors that are calling the chancellor, and on the other side you have no Muslim capital to speak of, no voice, no power, no influence, then the chancellor is not going to listen to the other side. The chancellor is on the side of the donors. That's our feeling as Muslims. We as a community need to, invest so we have a voice, and invest so we have power. And when we don't, our kids get arrested. That is actually a very huge reason why what we're seeing now has happened. So, there's a lot, so much to learn from this khutbah, from things that we've done here. The first point is awareness. And, I'm really proud every time I hear, every time I hear Sheikh point out things that everyone should be hearing. When you've got one person on the pulpit, or now 3, thank God, Sharif and Cheyenne and Sheikh, really calling out the way things are in the world, saying things that are just brilliant, on the cutting edge, trying to speak to the Muslim Ummah. And then you've got, the rest of the Muslim Ummah just at the status quo. There's a problem. As Sheikh pointed out, one of the most important things is that ability for the community to welcome back the discoveries, to connect people who are innovating and bring that knowledge back. These are really important lessons for us to learn. And anyway, I hope that people will spread the word and, spread this knowledge so that others can try and find their way here. That's one of the ways that we can make a difference. So along the lines of, there's so much dark news, I'm always happy to share also happy news. This week, amidst all of that, we had a glimmer of light. Our dear friend Witzke dropped her second album here, produced by Usuli. And this is one of the things that we do that is innovative, and that does challenge the status quo, and that does push the boundaries. And I'm so proud of being able to contribute to that innovation. So I wanted to take a moment then for Sharif, please, to share one of the most beautiful songs that I love on her album, called Subhanallah, just to get a sense of the kinds of stuff that we're doing. And let me just say, as I said before, when Witzke dropped her first album, a lot of what's really special about this music is when you hear sort of classic religious music, a lot of times, in other spaces you feel like, oh, okay, it's religious music. It's not necessarily beautiful. It's kind of, you know, it's beautiful in its own way, but it's not necessarily like mainstream beautiful. I think Witski's music is mainstream beautiful, and this is one of the ways that you reach out to people and you demonstrate that, you know, this is perfectly aligned with the Islamic faith, something that we have to offer and something very beautiful. So please go ahead and play the excerpt. We're hoping with some technology here that you'll be able to hear it. If not, you'll hear it in the edited version. Put this down, right? It's okay if it doesn't work.
Silently a melody reaches for eternity, praises sung so patiently, quietly arising from the stars. A song that no one owns. The breeze plays with the leaves, sounding joyful melodies, a reminder from the trees that strikes my heart as I sit there alone. A song that I have known. Subhanallah al-Azim wa bihamdi wa bihamdi. Subhanallah al-Azim. We sang and no one's listening. In the city flies a bird, singing praises no one's heard. They're too busy in a tizzy. It's a shame they haven't learned to let.
So that just gives you a flavor of this amazing music. It's so beautiful. Please check it out. We have, you can find it on our weekly email, on our, you search up Witski Marison. You can find it. I know you guys can. So thank you, Witska. Congratulations. It was an amazing process to record those songs. You know, again, another just incredible experience, and what, you know, an example for me of what you can do when you just choose, you put your brain to it. I want to do something different. I know nothing about recording music. We'd never been to a recording studio before. It turned out to be one of the most blessed activities we've done. And I think, you know, this is how we've talked about how things are going to change, you know, through music, through song, through poetry, you know, the human part of being a beautiful, ethical Muslim. And this is unfortunately what a lot of people criticize us for, but I think this is going to be the key to change in the future. So anyway, and the last thing is, I know I've been receiving messages from people about our annual conference in October. People are excited to come. We're so excited to meet you. They're asking for, you know, where should we stay? Please be patient. We are working on where it's going to be, where people should stay. We're trying to figure out the best way to manage that. So as soon as we know, we will share that information with you. But we're excited for the opportunity to gather with like-minded people, and, you know, really, embrace change and talk about things in a smart way, and hopefully inspire one another to be better. So it's a hard time, I know, for everyone, but you know, it's making a lot of things very clear, and may Allah help all of us. You know, I'm so proud of our kids. I'm so proud of who we are, what we stand for. And I just pray that everyone will be protected and empowered, and may God help, you know, everyone in Palestine, inshallah. With that, I'm so excited for another session, and thank you for joining us.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa subhanallah al-Ali al-Azim. Allahumma ashrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli ya Rabbil Alameen. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على الحبيب المصطفى محمد المرسل رحمة للعالمين خاتم الأنبياء والرسل أجمعين وعلى آله الأطهار الميامين وعلى صحبه المختارين وعلى من اتبعوا بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. So we left off number 66, which is actually a build upon and a continuation of number 65. The boundaries between them are permeable, and they all feed upon one another. So if you will recall, because we didn't quite, we started talking about 66, but we didn't finish it. من جهل المريد أن يسيء الأدب فتؤخر العقوبة عنه، فيقول لو كان هذا سوء أدب لقطع الإمداد وأوجب الإبعاد، فقد يقطع الإمداد عنه أو يقطع المدد عنه من حيث لا يشعر، ولو لم يكن إلا منع المزيد، وقد يقام مقام البعد وهو لا يدري، ولو لم يكن إلا أن يخليك وما تريد. So it is ignorance on part of the novice or the wayfarer, the student, to أن يسيء الأدب. To إساءة الأدب is to violate the rules of adab. And as we said, that so much of our relationship with our Maker is anchored on the notion of adab. Adab, proper moral character, which includes gratitude, but also includes so much more. And so for a student to do something that is a violation of good moral character with the Lord, or to put it simply, it's an exhibit of rudeness with the Lord. You are rude with God. How are you rude with God? You are rude with God by being disobedient, by taking God for granted, by not giving God God's due. So it is quite common for human beings to think of their rights, to intuitively be sensitive to what is due to them, what is due to me, what is my right, ma huquqi. But the Prophet ﷺ affirms the Quranic message in a very famous hadith, وَآتِ كُلَّ ذِي حَقٍّ حَقَّهُ, that a true Muslim must give each right its due. If your right is only meaningful or is only cognizable in relation to the rights of all else, the rights of all human beings, the rights of all creation, and the rights of God. And the Prophet ﷺ in saying وَآتِ كُلُّ ذِي حَقٍّ حَقَّهُ, that a Muslim must give each right and each owner and possessor of the right their due. Now, the innate focus on what is due to me, what are my rights, is the mother of all errors, in that we intuitively are sensitized to any situation in which we think our rights are being violated. Someone is treating us rudely, someone is denying us our due, someone is not recognizing our efforts, someone is not recognizing our feelings, someone is not listening to us, all the range of things in which a human being feels offended. But critical to understanding 66 is before you are offended about any violation to your right, have you thought about what you've done with the rights of others? Okay, so you're offended because people are not sensitized to your feelings. You're offended because people are not listening to you. You're offended because people are not recognizing your effort. You're offended because but how have you handled the rights of others? That's an a priori question. And for the wayfarer, the murid, what is drilled into you and what ought to be drilled into you is before you are offended and before you are upset about your rights, what have you done with God's rights? إساءة الأدب, to act without adab or with deficient adab with Allah, is anchored on the notion that you are not giving Allah Allah's due. So you are thinking first about your rights and not putting in the effort and energy in thinking about, well, what was due to God? And again, the principle of inseparability. A person, it is incoherent, and I keep emphasizing this because it is so lost in modern Islam. It is incoherent for a person to say, I give God God's due, I give God God's rights, حقوق الله, أوفي الله حقوقه, that I give Allah God's rights, but I do not give others their rights in the same way that the Prophet ﷺ taught us that who does not thank people does not thank God. It is philosophically and theologically incoherent to say, I fulfill God's rights, but I do not fulfill the rights of other human beings, or I do not fulfill the rights of creation itself, because they're all inseparable. If I violate the rights of my neighbor, I violated the rights of God. If I violate the rights of my spouse, I violated the rights of God. If I violate the rights of my siblings, I violated the rights of God. If I violate the rights of the orphan, I violated the rights of God. What we are not accustomed to thinking about is the converse of that. And that is, when you violate the rights of God, you are also violating the rights of all created things. And this is one of the biggest fallacies of modernity, is to say, well, if I'm a good human being, isn't that enough? But you are an immoral human being. By definition, you cannot be good because you have not fulfilled the rights of the Creator. So it is actually philosophically incoherent. It is impossible in the same way that it is impossible to say that you are good towards God without being good towards creation, it is also impossible that you are good towards creation if you're not good towards God. It is philosophically incoherent because morality is indivisible. If you are a person of gratitude, you are a person of gratitude with all. If you are a person of adab, you are a person of adab with all. You cannot have adab with the creation, the created, and deny the creator the adab that is due the creator. And this is core and essential to the Islamic outlook to things. And it's transformative to the way Muslims, if Muslims understood their faith correctly, it is transformative to the way that Muslims relate to everything. So, Principle 66 warns what we started talking about, warns about that you misread God's tolerance. Well, you start by denying God some of God's rights. You get away with it because no negative consequences follow. And then you misread that as, well, it means that I'm in good standing. It means that and deterioration in your relationship with Allah could be the result of severe trauma, but that's rare. Where, for instance, you lose a child and it breaks your relationship with Allah, or you're in Gaza and you see atrocities and it breaks your relationship with Allah. But what is far more common is that deterioration occurs gradually and in increments. And in increments of qillat adab and increments of denying God God's due, followed by God's tolerance of that. In other words, God doesn't punish you for it, at least on this earth. And then you don't notice that incrementally you've drifted away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the challenge, and this is from personal experience, the challenge is that this path requires so much introspection and self-reflection and isolation that the path of isolation desensitizes you to the way you are handling the rights of others and the rights of God. So that by becoming more and more isolated, you more and more do not relate to other human beings. And by not relating to other human beings, you lose the sensitivity towards discharging the rights of human beings. And we'll talk about this more in a second, but in this happening, you don't notice the imbalance in your relationship to manzumat al-huquq, to the system of rights itself. So, to put it very bluntly and very concretely, let's assume, or let's hypothetically imagine someone who goes on this path and is constantly going into uzla, into isolation. And they go into uzla, into isolation, in order to do dhikr and to do ibadah, to come close to Allah. But the more they do it, they no longer find pleasure in the company of human beings. And one of the most common dangers is that you find yourself, you think that you find great pleasure in God's company, but that in the dynamic of isolation and uzla, you've neglected the rights of a spouse, you've neglected the rights of children, you've neglected the rights of parents, you've neglected the rights of whoever. And that's the danger, because you might find yourself less and less tolerant of human beings and less and less able to relate to other human beings. And that's a risk that, again, the whole journey is to achieve a balance of equity and justice. And selfishness creeps in from the back door where you do not notice. Okay. Now, in this context, there is a lot that I can share with you. One of the stories that has stayed with me, a story that is shared in this context and sort of you reflect on, is the story of Moses and his cane. If you recall in the Quran, when Moses goes on the mount and God speaks to Moses, and in the Quran, God engages Moses and says, "What is this that you're holding?" And Moses replies, "This is my cane, this is my stick." And he says, "I use the stick to herd my sheep, and I use the stick for other purposes." And then God tells Moses, well, throw the stick, and Moses throws the stick and it becomes a snake. And Moses reacts to this in shock and fear and retreats. And then God tells Moses, pick up the snake. And when Moses does so, it returns back to being a stick. And the Moses rod, or the rod of Moses, one of the lessons is that your relationship to dunya, to life on earth, should be like Moses' rod. It is as if God is telling you, in order to exist on this earth with proper dominance over your own existence, in order to exist on this earth without anxiety and fear in relation to life on this earth, you must first discard the rod. So it is as if you imagine the rod as representative of earthly life, and God tells you, throw it away, discard it, and it becomes a snake. And you pick up the snake, this time with the power of God in your heart. And then the snake that you feared a minute ago, you achieve a perception of reality that is not possible unless first you discard your attachment to dunya, and second, you approach dunya with God anchored in your heart. So that, notice here that one of it is the relativity of reality. The stick is a rod that performs a function, But through God's will, it is also a snake. But through God's will, it returns to being a rod. One of the metaphysical axioms of Sufism and a lot of mystic paths is that reality is only reality through God's will, and that all reality interacts with our subjectivity and God's will. So in other words, there's nothing permanent and nothing real about existence, exactly like the rod. And it is only our subjectivities that give reality its appearance of truth. There could be a disease. God put the laws of causation, and that's why we deal with medicine, in order to navigate the rules of causation to treat a disease. But through God's will, that disease can disappear, can be cured instantaneously. Now, although we do not see miracles all the time, but it is the understanding, the anchored belief that Allah is the controller of the reality and negotiator of the mediator of reality, gives your relationship to life on earth a very different taste. So that you no longer exist, it is not life on earth that dominates you through your fears and anxieties, but you dominate life on earth through your certitude and trust in Allah. Now, so that's one of the, there's a lot of very beautiful things written about that metaphor, Moses and his rod, including some very beautiful Sufi poetry. Some of the other, actually, let's, one of the things that one of the lessons that is communicated in this context is that the six, what they called al-aqabat, the six impediments to elevating into the realm of as-salihin, or the realm of the truly pious. And the six impediments are seen as doors. And they tell you, you have 6 doors that you must open in order to elevate into that status where you are able to discard the rod and able to lose your fear of the rod and pick up the rod with Allah's trust. So, and the way that they try to conceptualize it is as if you are opening doors and closing doors. So, say you close the door of al-izz, إغلاق باب العز وفتح باب الذل, that you close the door of arrogance and you open the door of modesty. You are constantly interrogating yourself about what arrogance do I have in my heart that makes me think of what rights are due to me before I think of the rights of others and the rights of God. Because you are often angry about the rights that are due to you because of your pride. And so they tell you, close the door of pride maybe pride is a better word than arrogance. Close the door of pride and open the door of modesty. If you have a teacher, one of the things that your teacher would constantly remind you of is to, when they ask you how are you doing, they're not asking you just to be polite. They're actually asking because they want to know how have you handled your past days. And one of the things is then you share with your teacher events or experiences in which you lost your temper, in which you got heated up, in which you got pissed off. And I can't tell you, if you have a good teacher, the number of times the teacher will simply say, how firmly have you closed the door of pride? And how widely have you opened the door of modesty? And so instead of getting you to focus on how you've been wronged by others, they get you to focus inwards. To what extent is your ego driving you? And to what extent have you achieved dominance over that ego? So that's the first impediment. The second impediment is often articulated as إغلاق باب النعمة وفتح باب الشدة. Is that and people who don't know this tradition well might misunderstand this easily. It is opening the door of ease and luxury and comfort. Closing the door of ease and luxury and comfort, and opening the door of shidda. A lot of people would translate it as hardship, but in this context, it means opening the door of struggle. What you expect for yourself is not the achievement of comfort. It's not that I'm looking for my comfort. I actually am looking for the ways that I challenge myself and I work hard. And that is a very important impediment, because as long as your assumption or your attitude in life is, I am looking for comfort, you will always be focused on your own rights, not the rights of others. After all, your attitude is, what brings me comfort? What am I entitled to? And as long as your attitude is one of pleasure and comfort, you are irritated by the challenge and the hardship. But if you work to change your attitude, where you welcome struggle and hardship, you welcome the jihad, you welcome it's like saying, this is my chance to draw closer to Allah, because every time I struggle, I draw closer to Allah. It helps melt away one of the major impediments that the ego relies on, the expectation of comfort and luxury, because it always feeds the ego, and it always makes you think of, what was I denied, rather than, what am I obligated to do? What do I owe, rather than what is owed to me? The third, which is very similar, and I mean, whether there's a distinction is, I'll tell you what they say the distinction is, but anyway, is إغلاق باب الراحة وفتح باب الجهد, that you close the door of comfort and you open the door of juhd or hard work. What is the difference between the third and the fourth? In the third, the wayfarer, the student, when they say إغلاق باب النعمة, they actually focus in the third on controlling matters of what you covet and appetite. So one of the there's so many stories among the wayfarers, like Junayd and so on, about how they, in order to teach themselves denial, they stopped eating fruit. And there's a well-known story about Junayd that for 10 years he coveted an apple and refused to satisfy that desire for an apple for 10 years. This is what they focus on in the third, is matter of your appetite is often a door to covetousness. And both food and sex, that's often what's focused on the impediment number 3. Impediment number 4 is what I was talking about earlier, is that you welcome the opportunity for juhd, for jihad, for struggle. It's like, well, if there's no challenge, then there's no opportunity to grow, and there's no opportunity to get closer to Allah. And if my life is simply all ease, then you will inevitably drift away from your Lord. It is a rare individual indeed who can enjoy ease for a long time and not drift away from God. Or who can, okay. Oh, I misspoke and I said the difference between the third and the fourth. I was actually talking about the difference between the second and the third. We've only talked about 3. Is to close the door of pride, to close the door of luxury or ni'mah, that's the second. The third, to close the door of comfort, that's the third. So again, just so the first is to close the door of pride and open the door of modesty. The second, to close the door of luxury and to open the door of hardship or struggle, shiddah. And the third is to close the door of comfort and open the door of juhd. إغلاق باب الراحة وفتح باب الجهد. So that's 3 so far. Okay, رابع, the fourth, which is something that, this has had an impact on my entire life, is to close the door of sleep and open the door of denial of sleep. That one of the entitlements that teaches spiritual laziness is the insistence on sleep. Now, sleep is dangerous when it is a way to escape anxiety, when it is a way to escape escape your conscience bothering you. Sleep, like eating food and like sex, could be a means of escaping your problems, escaping your challenges. And when you focus on your right to sleep, and you do so at the expense of God's right for you to, as the Quran put, تَتَجَافَى عَنِ الْمَضَاجِعِ, that you actually deny yourself sleep for the sake of God. That is why, if you are training in this path, a proper training involves a lot of staying up and staying up late at night, denying, denying yourself comforts, even just to discipline yourself and challenge yourself. So it is not that you are always sleep deprived, but that you intentionally deny yourself what your body covets occasionally. And you don't just stay up wasting time. So we're not talking about, staying up watching TV or playing games. We're talking about where you stay up learning or worshiping. Okay, the fifth is the impediment of wealth. As long as and they say إغلاق باب الغنى وفتح باب الفقر, that unless you learn to give away material things, wealth, and to give away for the sake of Allah, even if it means serious sacrifices on your part, even if it means, and in fact, we are pushed to have it mean that, where you want something. One of the hardest things for me was in growing up was when I would be told, no, you have to give away your money and not buy the books you want to buy. So that was extremely hard for me throughout my life, because there would be books that I want, and then I would be told, no, you have to donate what you have, and that often meant, well, I'm not going to buy this book this month, I'm not going to buy this book for the next 6 months, which was, for me, the hardest thing. I never cared if that, if the sacrifice meant I don't buy clothes, I never cared. Or, or some gadget, because, I was in that age where computers were coming in, and fancy phones and different that stuff never bothered me as much as when I would have to put off buying books that I wanted to buy. But the financial sacrifice and denial is one of the things that you must work on. Finally, the sixth, which is one of the one that requires the greatest amount of reflection, is إغلاق باب الأمل وفتح باب الاستعداد للموت. That you close the door of hopefulness and plans for life on this earth. Well, I plan, I'm dream of owning a house on a riverbed. And you open the door of the expectation and preparation for death. So, and this feeds into everything else, because my thought then takes seriously the idea that this life is transitory, and this life is but temporary for this life is the dunya, is the lower life in preparation for the higher life. And as long as you're thinking, as long as you spend most of your time thinking about your future and thinking about your investments for your future or your plans for the future, the impediment to feeling your maker are very serious. the more you take seriously death and the more you reflect upon death, the more you will find this impediment withering away, and your ability to draw closer to Allah. So these are the six that are often taught in this context. There are a couple of other points that I mean, when I'm just thinking of the lessons that came was the aphorism 66 or article 66. One of the stories that just stuck with me as we were talking about the impediments, and I think it was, I mean, I don't quite remember which particular impediment the story was shared, but I think it was the very first one, that you close the door to ego and open the door to modesty. It's reported that Junayd, who was a very famous Sufi, was once going to the mosque, and he saw a beggar at the entrance of the mosque begging for money. And Junayd thought to himself, it would be more worthy of this man to have sought work than to beg. Now, this is consistent with what the Prophet ﷺ taught, that the hand that gives is better than the hand that receives when it comes to begging. But thinking that, as a Junayd is often taught in was the story of, and what Junayd said about himself, is later on that day, he does his dhikr, and during his dhikr, he realizes that he erred, that he committed an act of arrogance in thinking that. Why was it an act of arrogance? In order to reach that conclusion, you've made numerous assumptions, and you don't know. But so much of the affairs of other human beings, if you're externally focused, you are constantly evaluating what's wrong with others. And you are constantly assessing and pontificating upon what's wrong with others. If you're inwardly focused, and that's the closing the door of pride, if you're inwardly focused, you are too busy disciplining yourself for what's wrong with you. And as we will see in the aphorism that follows, in fact, you are taught that often when you evaluate what's wrong with others, you are projecting yourself onto others, as we will see in a second. That when the Prophet ﷺ says, Al-Muslim mir'atu akhi, that a Muslim is the mirror for his brother, that a proper understanding of this is actually that in order to be a proper mirror, you must cleanse the self. And in order to cleanse the self, when you cleanse, you realize that often when you judge others, you are doing nothing but projecting your own moral deficiencies onto others and ascribing them unto others. To put it if you fear laziness, you see laziness in other people. If you fear anxiety, you see others as often as anxious. If you are a person that loves money, you see others often as stingy. And you are consistently taught that the Prophet ﷺ says think 70 times. But in this past, you are taught to think numerous times about the ways that you could be projecting what is within you onto others. We'll get to this in a second. But the story of Junayd, because of course in a country like Egypt, there are a lot of beggars. And every major mosque, like mosques, of Fatima Zahra, or mosque of Hussein, or mosque of Amr ibn al-As, at the entrance of every mosque, there are numerous beggars. And I remember these numerous conversations with shuyukh. So if we feel in our heart an annoyance because if once you give one beggar, you're mobbed by all the beggars. And I remember you are taught, remove the annoyance from your heart. In fact, see the beggars coming to you as doing you a favor of an opportunity to gain blessing with Allah. If you don't have money to give them, apologize, but feel the apology in your heart, modestly, not arrogantly. You are the assumption that you must be better is a very problematic assumption. Well, actually, So here in this context, you're often taught that اهجر العصاة رحمة بهم لا تعززا عليهم واكرم المؤمن ولو كان عاصي. That what this says is that abandon or do not uhjur is what? Abandon, stay away from sinners, keep your distance from sinners, but not out of disdain for them. Keep away from sinners out of mercy and compassion for them, out of pitying the state that they're in, with a sincere desire that they refrain from the sin. But if you are unable to stop it, then your interacting with it is encouraging it. And that is an offense that you commit against them when you empower their sin by enabling it. لا تعززا عليهم, not out of disdain and not out of pride. وَاكْرِمِ الْمُؤْمِنِ وَلَوْ كَانَ عَاصِي. And remember that every believer has rights, even if they are a sinner. And their right upon you is to honor them, even if they are sinning. So, one of the lessons that I remember is one of our shuyukh, we took us, asked who has a car, and there were a couple of people that had cars, and we drove in a car, and he said drive to a particular area where there is a cabaret in Egypt, where people are drinking and there's dancing, and we stopped the car in front of the cabaret, and then he said, look at, what do you feel? And of course we said haram, sin, and he said, no, what you should feel is your heart should break in sorrow for these people. You should not disdain them. You should not تحتقرهم. Ihtiqar is, disdain or think of them as worthless. That is not your right. What you owe them is the right to honor them because they're human beings. And especially if they're Muslim, although they're sinners, then they have an additional right. And you should sincerely pray to Allah for their guidance, but there is no space for you to feel superior to them. And it's one of the lessons that stayed with me, because my previous life, before that, I used to belong to a group in which we were planning to go attack a cabaret and destroy it and burn it. And just the contrast between the two shuyukh, that the sheikh who was encouraging us to go burn a cabaret and the sheikh who took us and told us, embarrassed us about our sense of superiority, stayed with me throughout my life. Actually, let's, instead of waiting for the next aphorism, might as well deal with it here. This issue of, or the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that al-mu'min mir'atu akhih, that a believer should be a mirror towards his brother or towards his sister, towards a fellow believer. In order to attest through your existence, in order to testify through your existence, in order for someone to look at you and see in you the ways that they have not fulfilled their obligations towards Allah. And put differently, in order to be a true example unto others, you must purify and you must cleanse. Because a dirty mirror cannot be a mirror that serves the brother or sister well. You are a soiled mirror. You are not a clear mirror. Now, in order to clean the mirror, in order to be a mirror that performs that function that the Prophet ﷺ talks about, you must cleanse and purify. Now, the intuitive defensive move that we human beings do is that we judge, before I get to the defensive movement first, we judge the world, we see the world, we understand the world purely through our subjectivities. We are not gods. We have no objective way of seeing the world. We only see the world through the eye of subjectivity. We understand things through the eye of subjectivity. None of us understand things through the eye of an objective divine standard. It is arrogant to think so. So what you find attractive or what you find distasteful is through the subjective consciousness. Now, the biggest fear that one should have is that, well, if my subjectivities are closer to what they call at-tawariq al-shaytaniyya, they are closer to the interventions and influences of shaitan, of demons, then you are truly worried that what attracts you and what repels you is demonically based. See, that is a real danger. Because if my tastes are infiltrated by shaitan, that is a serious problem. So that is why some people, and I know this again in Egypt, some people hear the azan and it bothers them. There's a movement in Egypt led by disgusting human beings to silence the azan all over Cairo. Why? Because they find the azan truly unsettling. But imagine what subjective influences when other people listen to the azan and they feel a sense of comfort, right? These are your subjectivities, and they are either influenced by what they say al-tawariq al-shaytaniyya, demonic interventions, or al-waridat al-ilahiyya, divine gifts. Now, al-waridat al-ilahiyya, the divine gifts, come to you all the time. And al-tawariq al-shaytaniyya, the divine interventions, also come to you. The demonic interventions come to you all the time. It is you who, through scrutinizing your subjectivity, that will be alert. It's like you have an alarm system. And it's you, through working on your subjectivities, where your alarm system will go off, recognizing a tawariq shaytaniyya, a demonic intervention, or recognizing a waridat ilahiyya, divine gifts. Now, if you don't work on yourself, you don't notice. Why do you need to notice? Because when God gives you al-waridat al-ilahiyya, the divine gifts, your alarm should go off and you should invest in it. I feel like reading the Quran. The alarm goes off and you say, I'll do it. You don't tell yourself, oh, okay, I'll do it tomorrow. And then it's gone and you won't do it. Or I feel like praying more. Or I feel I should pray slower. Or I feel like I should concentrate in prayer. Or I feel I want to just sit and think of my relationship with Allah. All of these are waridat ilahiyya. Al-tawariq al-shaytaniyya comes in the form of you deserve, you're entitled, it's your right, demand more, why are you accepting less? This is the form of the demonic. You are the sum total. Your psychology is the sum total of these two elements, al-tawariq al-shaytaniyya wal-waridat al-ilahiyya. And then your subjective handling of both. How you've, throughout your life, the sum total of how you've handled the demonic and how you've handled the divine. Now, one of the defensive measures that we engage in all the time is because we see reality through our subjectivities, is to project ourselves onto reality all the time. So we project through some ways that are less apparent and some ways that are very apparent. So when I see, for instance, to use a silly example, but when I see the only worthy music in the world is Kulthum, and all other music is trash, I'm projecting what is inside of me, right? And if I see through my subjectivities the world constantly as an ugly and threatening place, it is often because I myself have a very limited amount of beauty within. So I'm not noticing, I don't see what is beautiful. If I have no patience for the Quran of creation, and I hardly notice it, and I hardly invest in it, it is again a projection of the subjectivities of the self. But one of the most dangerous defensive methods is that we project the weaknesses within and the faults within. So if we tend to be judgmental, we will tend to see others as judging us all the time. And in reality, it is because we ourselves are very judgmental people. If we tend to see everyone as treating us arrogantly, it is often because of our own inflated sense of pride. Now, of course, there's a measure of equity and fairness and justice in this, in that when is someone else committing a real sin, a real wrong, a real moral error, and when are you projecting what is within? Well, the only way for the mirror is for the mirror to be clean. And for the mirror to be clean, you are taught to introspect, to look within before you judge. So, I mean, to again use a silly, I judge a murderer like the president of Egypt, Sisi, who committed a massacre in Rabaa and several other places. Yes, there is a considerable amount of introspection in resting with the conclusion that if I was in power, I wouldn't massacre people like Sisi did. But did I have to go through the exercise of interrogating myself? Well, Khalid, if you were the president of Egypt, would you have massacred people to secure your power base? Yes, I did. And I asked myself many times, would I have withstood the test? And I thank Allah numerous times that Allah has not put me through the trial of holding power. But I reached the moral judgment that I must judge a grave criminal like Sisi, or like the king of Saudi Arabia, or the Wali al-Ahd, the MBS or MB, whatever the things are. But things get very difficult and very challenging when you're not talking about obvious criminals, obvious massacrers, and demonic people. Because when you talk about these kings and presidents, they're demonic. They're clearly demonic. I mean, but when you are talking about people just like you, who are a combination of the divine and the demonic, who are struggling just like you to cleanse themselves of the demonic and to invest themselves in the divine. And then it becomes a far more pressing challenge to exercise judgment with a great deal of reserve and a great deal of introspection. The lessons, there are some very beautiful things written on the hadith, al-Muslim mir'atu akhih, Muslim is the mirror of their brother. Some very beautiful things written in Islamic literature. Okay. Let's go to, I think I covered. I mean, as you can tell, 66 is one that you stay with. I mean, there was a lot of halaqas about just aphorism 66, so we cover it with, Okay, let's go to the next one, which in this text 67. إذا رأيت عبدا أقامه الله تعالى بوجود الأوراد وأدامه عليها من طول الإمداد فلا تستحقرن ما منحه مولاه لأنك لم تر عليه سيم العارفين ولا بهجة المحبين فلولا وارد ما قد ورد. This, by the way, this last expression, فلولا وارد ما قد ورد, becomes hikmah that is often repeated. Okay, so if you see a servant whom God has made to abide in the recitation of awrad litanies and prolonged that's not right, and not وأدامه عليها مع طول الإمداد, that the person exercises that litany for long periods of time and has been doing it for a long period of time. Do not disdain what the Lord has given him, on score that you do not detect the signs of the Gnostics on him, nor the splendor of lovers. For had there been no inspiration, there would have been no litany. Okay, what is this talking about? This is closely connected to 66. Is that it is not that you just judge the beggar or the sinner, but we often judge the shuyukh themselves. So I have a subjective perception of what a pious person ought to look like. And this is superficiality in piety. That you come and you say, when I talk about pietistic affectations in my book, Reasoning with God, it's actually inspired by this very much. That you come and you look for the superficial signs of piety, and you say, this person is supposed to be a person who's memorized the Quran, is supposed to be a person that does dhikr all the time. Why does he look so normal to me? Why does he look so average to me? Why does he look not sheikh-like to me? Well, again, look within before you judge. Look at what subjectivities influence your. Now, this is in the past. This is actually quite a thing, because some people will do wird for a short period of time and will achieve great results. They will have experiences that are astounding. And some people will do wird for very long period of time, for years, and achieve nothing. And one of the real threats is that those who have achieved quick results will judge those who have not achieved quick results and have a sense of sort of superiority and arrogance about them. And that is one of the grave mistakes in the path. If you have a good sheikh, they might even threaten to expel you if they detect that sense of arrogance. Because the fact that someone is drawn to the wird is a warid ilahi, is a gift from God. And might be that this person who is engaged in the wird for a very long time without the results that you think should have been achieved, is far closer to you and far closer to Allah and far more dear to Allah than you. The other thing is that guarding against pietistic affectations, or what I've called pietistic affectations in my writing, that you have a superficial, and this is we see in modern Islam all the time. Someone wants to, we see this among Muslim speakers in mosques. In order to become a speaker in the speaker circuit in Islamic circles, right, you put on certain clothes, you put on a certain appearance, you become sheikh-like, whatever that sheikh-like is. Or a woman wearing hijab is accepted, wearing a woman not wearing hijab, as if these are signs of piety. This aphorism is what is telling you, behave, have modesty. Don't judge closeness or nearness to Allah by superficial appearances, but by actual substance that comes from a human being. What time is it?
8:50.
It's 8:50?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's stop here then. I thought it was earlier than that. Sorry. Okay. We finish. So next, inshallah, we start with number 68 in this count. You want to come close or okay?
It's good to go? Okay. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much, Sheikh. This is always so incredibly valuable. I love it when you talk about pietistic affectation. This is so much like right now, like so much of our world is just, peeling off that superficial layer and forcing us to, look at the reality below. And I think that what's so beautiful, especially about what you said today, is so much of it is really about choice. When you talk about God giving us choice and, the choice to close the door to certain things and open the door to other things, but also to recognize that very powerful heuristic you gave us about, subjectivity and understanding. Is your subjectivity being influenced by something demonic or something divine? And as the sum total of the choices that we make, what we give power to over us affects who we are. And that's something that is it's just so mind-blowing and life-transforming. Just that one thing to think about from today is just so powerful. We never hear these things in our normal, spaces, but that can change everything. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, and I hope, inshallah, that more people will find this. And thank you so much. Thank you for being with us. And we look forward to seeing you. I think next week we'll probably be here on a Saturday instead of Sunday, as I understand. But look for the announcement in our weekly email. So thank you, everybody. And I hope you have a wonderful week. And keep all of our kids in your prayers. Assalamu alaikum.